Hello there. Welcome in. Please sit down for a moment if you have the time. So last time, if you remember, you caught me writing some poetry. So I'm writing a poem that I'm calling the Griffin so far, and I've made a couple changes since last time we spoke. I've included it within the wider literature concerning King Arthur. So this poem, The Griffin, concerns specifically Sir Lancelot towards the end of his life after Arthur has passed. I won't give away too much, but needless to say, if you're curious about that part of Lancelot's life, that Mallory's Memoir to Arthur is the source you should go to and is my primary source, although not the only one. Anyway, last time I had a chance to read you some of that poem that I was working on, and I had mentioned that I took the meter and rhyme scheme from Tolkien and from Bilbo, actually, as we'll see here in a moment. So I've written my poem in alternating rhymes, so they're in quartets, so the second and fourth line rhyme, and the whole being written in Iambic Tetrameter. And I took that from Tolkien this last year when I was reading Lord of the Rings. I usually read it annually. And so anyway, it comes from Bilbo's poem as he recites it in the Hall of Fire in Rivendell, as you remember, and it's concerning Arundel. So I thought I might just read some of that and perhaps a little bit more of the poem that I'm working on that certainly echoes the structure and meter of Bilbo's poem. So this is from Many Meetings. See, we're going out here. So it says here, there he wandered long in a dream of music that turned into running water, and then suddenly into a voice. It seemed to be the voice of Bilbo, chanting verses, faint at first, and then clearer ran the words. Arundel was a mariner that tarried in Arvenian. He built a boat of timber felled in Nimbrithil to journey in. Her sails he wove of silver fair, of silver were her lanterns made. Her prow he fashioned like a swan, and light upon her banners laid. In panoply of ancient kings, in chained rings he armored him. His shining shield was scored with runes to ward all wounds and harm from him. His bow was made of dragon horn, his arrows shorn of ebony. Of silver was his habergeon, his scabbard of chalcedony. His sword of steel was valiant, of adamant his helmet tall, an eagle plume upon his crest, upon his breast an emerald. And that's just the very beginning of that poem. It's much longer. I encourage you to read it yourself. And of course, that last line, upon his breast an emerald. Later, Aragorn chuckles at Bilbo and says, if you wish to write of such great things, that's your business. But for whatever reason, Aragorn thought there ought to be an emerald involved, and that imagery and symbolism that is really tied to him as well. So anyway, I thought I might share that with you. It's such an excellent poem. It's really quite astounding. I've always enjoyed stories where the author vicariously creates poetry or music or something like that through their characters, and Tolkien does that everywhere, primarily with Bilbo. But others, Brian Jakes, the author of the Redwall series, constantly does that in little rhymes or songs. He's constantly doing that, and I've always appreciated that. You could write an excellent story and also, as if they're unrelated, and write poetry as well. Kenneth Grahame does that in The Wind and the Willows. I'm reminded of that. My son and I are still reading through that. So anyway, just such an excellent poem. Again, I encourage you to read it. And then I thought I might just share a little bit more of my poem, just in this kind of first draft here. So I'll start. Having trouble keeping a light here. The thrice fair three, whose deeds demand the maids of court to magnify and give the grand and gloried band their due of dote and ardent cries. I need not now by lengthy words instill the stories of their fame, save one shall I to you describe, by boon begun I blessed became. Their flasks were filled and pouches packed with bread and wine to break each fast, one blight or bared with neither be, for full and fresh they'd firmly last. As such were girt with sword and shield, then facing west they forward flew, from Unity their native home they marched or more at morning new. They wending walked and went their way far over hill and under tree, until they trod on that same track, and mildly marched on up to me. That sinner they were searching for was me, who measured great in wrong. I watched them wend their way past me. They called me quick to come along. I rubbed from rest my sleep-filled eyes, and wondered why they fain would see me rise from rest that did me good, for grave not good your fate might be. That one whose words were filled with doom was Hope, who held my gaze until I heard what he, whose help is faith, did say to still my daunted will. With need enormous must you come, and follow freely we who can against assist your soul in its defense, from wrath and hell's unceased remand. Condemned, I quailed from their decree, and wished they would my plight to aid. I begged this band on bended knee to flee this fate that I had made. Then Charity, whose charge is love, admonished me of sloth's delay. If knew you now what wretch you were, why would you waste the while away? Of Judas' drear and dismal end, did not you know his somber shame? His grief secured no gifted grace, for simple sorrow ends no aim. Be pleased, you prophets, proffer help. I see that surely I was base, to weep and whinge while not inflamed, to love that hope of faith's embrace. But answer, please, a doubt of mine. In dreaming days do you attend, or Britain's earth do you affect? You strangers seem by minds pretend. If meet we marry on that main, that common called your British course, then does our discourse matter more than if imagined bodied forth? But shall I share the answer wished? Assume the strangers we you do, but where are we the stranger you? Said Hope, who held my eye anew. For this fair land, resuming said, ill-born by you has ever been, will always be more home to us, for our affairs are further in. Then Faith, now fain I would depart this slope and shaded canopy, we must now march to our object, postponing questions presently. So they meet the dreamer. Again, the dreamer has seen this shining court, this flaming court that's called unity, which in Piers Plowman is his word for holy kirk, for the church. And the king commands, and hope, faith, and charity issue forth to find a sinner whom they ought to assist. And it's Lancelot who's dreaming all of this, and they come up and meet with him and have this initial discourse. And of course you have the reference from Shakespeare with, I believe it's Theseus, who says, the poet's eye in fine frenzy rolling doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven, and as imagination bodies forth the form of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes, and gives to airy nothings a local habitation and a name. So I stole from that, and that's where we get, then does our discourse matter more than if imagined bodied forth? And of course there are many other allusions in my poem. So anyway, that's all I had for today. I'm so pleased that you could stop by once again and just kind of enjoy some poetry, enjoy a pipe that we struggle to keep lit. But isn't that what we ought to do? I suppose a flame kept lit is a good imagery for the Christian life. So anyway, all of that to say, cheers and thanks for stopping by.